Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple, Congregation on Shemana. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon J. Schechter Day School of Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, Anshe Chesed in New York City. And we're starting off, we're recording this on the 300th day of the war, 300 days of the hostages ordeal, in a momentous week. And of course, thinking about everyone as they experience this important milestone, unfortunate milestone, but also in the days that we have ahead, which are days of tension. So we are extending our thoughts, our wishes, our prayers for everyone in the solidarity of this moment of the Jewish people, Klal Yisrael. Reading, of course, these last two parshiot of the book of Bamidbar, Matot and Masei. It's a double parsha. This week it does mean that shul is going to be longer. It's just a long reading for the Torah, um, and it does mark a milestone in terms of the year, in terms of the summer, in terms of our lives. We'll touch about on that in later. Matot starts off with some uh, rules pertaining to vows. We've talked about in the past, some unfinished business with Midian and retribution for the Midianites. Um, but then it takes us into the land and the the understanding that the people are about to enter the land and that the land itself is going to be subdivided into territories for the different tribes. uh, Two and a half tribes make a delegation before Moses, and they would like to possess the um, the eastern side of the Jordan, the land on the eastern side, which is not technically the land that has been promised to Abraham. And they approach Moses and their delegation. And I'm going to ask Jeremy, pick it up from there. This is, we're looking at chapter 32 here, where this delegation comes to Moses. So what happens in this story here?
So a feature of Jewish life, and by Jewish life, I mean the vast sweep of the history of our people, is a very intense concentration on a special place that we love, place that our ancestors lived, a place that we feel is a holy land and a reality that many, many, many Jewish people live outside that land and focus on that land. So the the scholarly approach to our Torah book, where did the book come from? How was it assembled? What are the different elements in it? I'm speaking not now as a person of faith, but a person who has inherited an ancient book. We know that in ancient times, in ancient Israel, we had a great, big, very intense settlement. It was the most important part of the Jewish people living in the land of Israel. And there were people who lived in Egypt. And after the uh, destruction of the temple on the part of the Babylonians, who first the Assyrians who exiled a whole mess of people to the east, and then certainly the Babylonians who exiled a whole mess of people into Mesopotamia. That's why they call it Mesopotamia. That substantial majorities of the Jewish people lived in Mesopotamia and a big chunk in Egypt, and there was that group of people at the homeland. Now, I'm given all that as background because the story that the Torah is going to tell about a group of Jews who didn't want to live in the promised land, heartland, I think that almost every Jew who read the Torah for the last 3,000 years or 2,300 years, to be maybe a little bit more precise, a whole lot of years, understood this dynamic. It's a place that we love, the place that is the main stage of our people, and people who live with outside. So the tribes of Menashe, the half of the tribe of Menashe, or it's possibly to be interpreted as the half tribe, because Menashe is Menashe and Ephraim are the children of Yosef. They are a kind of an appendix to the tribe. The tribe of Reuven, the tribe of Gad, and either half of Menashe or the half tribe of Menashe, they say, listen, just look at us. We're pretty wealthy. We got a ton of livestock. This place where we happen to be, it's pretty good for livestock here on the eastern bit of the Jordan in Gilad and Yazer. That's the place where they are. And they come to Moses and they say, we've conquered some of these cities here from the Amorites, and they really are just perfect for our livestock. We really would like to stay here. The land that God has given us because we did win it in battle against the Amorite, we would like to stay here. And Moses says to them, and by the way, this pasuk, this verse that I'm about to say, which is 32:6, has a great deal of resonance in contemporary Israel, as some big, large number of people, the ultra-Orthodox citizens, don't want to serve in the army. Moses, Vayomer Moshe livnei Gad uvnei Reuven, Moses says to those tribes, Ha achechem yavo lemilchama ve'atem teshvu po. Your brothers are going to war, and y'all are remaining here. That's not right. And so Moses ends up making a deal with them and says that if you guys, what we're going to do is we're going to build some safe places for your, wives and children. We're going to reinforce those places. We're going to build corrals for your livestock, and those people can remain there, but you have to serve as chalutzim. That word chalutzim, which of course has the modern resonance of Zionist pioneers, but here in Numbers 32, it means kind of shock troops. You go fight the battle, and if at the end of the battle you've done everything you've promised, then you can come back here and live in the comparatively wealthy area. So I think that the dynamics of Jews who are doing well in the diaspora, who choose not to enter the promised land, and the relationship that they have to it, like B'nai Reuven, B'nai Gad, and B'nai Menashe, I think there's a very resonant story here as we think about our own relationships to in the land and out of the land.
Barry, want to just
Yeah, I think there's a larger question involved here too, because I think the way that you describe it, Jeremy, it fits very well with our experience in the second half of the 20th and the beginning of the 21st century, when our families have been in diaspora for many, many years, and Israel is relatively new. But the story that the Torah is telling this week is it's the beginning of the Zionist enterprise, so to speak. It's the first Zionist enterprise. The people are about to enter the promised land, and suddenly 2.5 tribes decide we like it better here. So what does that say about Zionism? What does it say about God? And what does it say about our concept, which I think we all have to wrestle with no matter how we come out on it, with the idea of a promised land? If you could say no to the promised land before you get there, wherein lies the promise?
so
This is why it's a great story, because, and this is why I phrased it in the sort of framework of that there have always been Jews who have opted not to live there, right? So of course we regard it as the promised land. Of course we regard it as the main stage of our people's history. And I do too. And I have to also deal with my own anxiety, regret, conflicted feelings, ambivalence about the fact tomorrow I could get on a plane and I would be in Israel. And
so you identify then, if I can read something into your words, with the economic argument that these tribes make, that we see that life is good in Galut or in Tfutzot, in exile or in the diaspora, and we're willing to stay here. And Moshe is saying that you could stay, but you also made a commitment that you have to honor. So wherein is our commitment, those of us who live in the diaspora today, to the modern state of Israel? What is our bargain that the tribes Gad, Reuben, and Menashe did in the Bible? What do we do today?
right, we commute.
we commute.
We can no,
Well, so it would be easier though to commute from the Golan Heights or from east of the Jordan than from the United States.
right, but and here, of course, big, asterisk, which is it's not cheap to commute, but it's well within our ability, if we have the means to travel quite often to Israel, and to experience being inside the land. As you're talking, and what I'm thinking about is we have such a picture of the land through experience and through picture and through cartography, none of which existed in biblical times. Um, and so what you do have is narrative, and what you do have is song, and what you do have is imagination, and what you do have also is the lived experience of the people who will live in the land and then translate their experience in the land through memory and story to subsequent generations. Um,
You said, Elliot, before we started talking, you said a beautiful phrase from
and
a
not
very
well, which is,
and I really think that this captures my feelings. So why don't you talk about that for a
so
sec?
the phrase was, Aliyah is about going to live in Israel, and there is a bit of a switch here, which is having Israel live in you. And and I think that line is worth meditating on, because you know we go to Israel, we travel, we spend significant time in Israel, we study in Israel, we live in Israel, our families live in Israel, relatives, etc., friends, and then we are outside the land of Israel. Israel lives in us, and we share in the vicissitudes um, of Israel. We share in its anguish. We share in its triumph. We share in the life experience and the translation and the story of Israel and all of its culture. And Israel lives in us if we enjoy Israeli cuisine and culture in other ways.
Music and Hebrew.
Everything.
I don't really, it's not that I don't relate to, of course, this is a feature of our modern quote unquote diaspora Zionism. I don't primarily relate to Israel as we have to have Israel to save Jewish lives when the Soviets persecute them, or when, when in Ethiopia they need to be rescued. I think those things are true. They're fabulous. They're important, and I am for them. But ultimately, Israel lives in me because it is such a rich expression of Jewish life and culture, future and past, Hebrew, all those things. And that does live in me in a real way. It's interesting to me, just this is really a parenthetical point. Um, anti-Semites have often accused Jews of having a quote unquote dual loyalty, as until John F. Kennedy was the president, this was a feature of his campaign in 1960, is that Catholics were accused of having quote unquote dual loyalty to their American citizenship and to their international religion. So Jews have been accused in some negative way of having quote unquote dual loyalty to their citizenship and their international religion. Dual loyalty, right here. I got it. I'm an American. I'm proud to be American. I love this country. I fulfill my citizenship with full heart, and I'm totally loyal and feel a deep part, and it lives in me, part of this international family, which also, since 1948, has a real national political expression.
Right. I mean, that is the condition of a modern Jew, is to have those valences. You have a modern Jew living outside of Israel, a valence to where you are, and a valence, of course, to Israel, which is living very much in our imagination, or I mean, not in our imagination. We're directly connected more than ever in an era of instant media. I mean, any one of us can, turn on Israeli television, watch it easily, live
On
stream
our phones.
on our
On our
phones,
phones.
etc. We instant, a lot of Israeli media is published in English as well. We can get instant bulletins and blogs and all sorts of updates to the minute, basically, especially in newsworthy times like the one we're living in. And so we get a sense this Parsha Matot and Parsha Masei give us a sense of space and especially in terms of trying to convey in our imagination through the tools that are available in the text what is going to take place in the land. And there's a dynamic that takes place in the land that is the dynamic of the shared experience of all the tribes. Some tribes want to have one experience, the rest of the tribes are going to have another experience of conquest, and this will play itself out beyond the scope of the Torah already in the book of Joshua when they get into the land. I want to spend a moment or two just thinking about the rest of the Torah reading this week, Parshat Masei, which is a different kind of geography. And here, what I want to have you guys think about is the geography of space, which is the land is defined by borders, which is what we will learn here, but also the geography of journey. And Masei is the geography of journey. I always return. It's more the more romantic of the themes here, the journey theme. Ela Masei b'nei Yisrael asher yotzu me'eretz Mitzrayim, and the different places that they go on this journey.
Well, especially when we remember that the towns that are being remembered are where bad things happen. And there's nothing that quite works for a romantic than a little suffering.
Of course. Okay. 42 places, if I'm not mistaken, that are disclosed here, the journey. And it's a bit of a song, as we've talked about.
How does it go? There's like a, and I never really remember this. Is it like
It's
how's it
it's
go?
almost like the Shirat Hayam. Vayisume tam, vayashava pi achirot, hashem v'nimon vayisumi pi achirot,
But
vayisumi pi elima velim. No, it's actually not that way.
it's
But
broken up into more than one aliyah, though, which is kind
yeah,
of curious. So if
okay,
you sing it as a song, it doesn't quite fit with our liturgical reading on Shabbat.
right. Yeah, you have to have Elias. You have to have people. You have to define it out. I
Well,
mean,
especially with the long reading, you could actually read the whole thing as the first aliyah, I suppose.
in the double reading, I have it open right. The Shvi, I'm sorry, the Revi'i of the double reading will end Matot and begin Masei and take
But
you
that's
all
always with the double portion.
right, and it will take you all the way through to the end of the journey. So you will actually get all of
Oh,
the
so now, okay, but when you read it individually,
when you read an individual, no, it's
I mean, okay.
yeah.
I want to make one observation is that so we have the three Haftarot. Last Shabbos was the first, this Shabbos is the second, next Shabbos will be the third. The first two are Jeremiah chapters 1 and 2, and then the second one is Isaiah chapter 1, and they're all rebuke. We call them the Tzlata de Puranuta, the three of rebuke before Tisha B'Av, between the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, and Jeremiah number 1. Oops, let's click back. Disappeared from my window, screwed me up there. Okay. Jeremiah, he's yelling at the people, he's giving them what for, as always. But the end of the first of the three of rebuke is about the romantic part of journey, exactly as
Yeah.
Elliot started to say.
Read the verse.
I'm
Okay.
scrolling to it. Haloch b'karata b'oznei Yerushalayim. Go forth, Jeremiah, and go proclaim in the ears of all the Jerusalemites, Lemor, saying, Kol mar Adonai zacharti la chesed ne'urayich, avat kilulotayich. You people terrible. I'm so mad at you, but I still remember the love of your youth, and when you were a young bride, lechtech acharai b'midbar, but Eretz lo zerua, you went following me into the desert, an unsown land. You didn't know what was going to happen, but you had faith, and we went on this journey together. And so it's embedded in a big screed about their failings, but there's a little hint and a remembrance of the goodness of the journey. So when we get the Masei today, which is it will sometimes the Haftarah will sometimes coalesce with the journey passage, depending on calendrical factors. But I hear in that verse and in this Masei passage a little bit of a celebration of the journey that God and Israel went on together in the
But
desert.
it's so interesting because, even in the Tanakh itself, we have different kinds of relationships to the journey. So you've just quoted that great passage, from Jeremiah, which is the metaphor of courtship. And then in every Kabbalat Shabbat, we recite these verses from, the Psalms. Arbaim shana kut bedor, vaomar am toeh levavhem, which I don't have
I
the
was mad at you for so long. I was so
oh,
mad at you.
yeah, akut bedor. I was, and I said to you, you were a people to'elevav. You erred. You were treacherous. So we have a few depictions of the desert journey. Look, we've been
There's
reading in
the
real time. You know,
there is exactly instantiating what you just said. The desert journey. If you open up the book of Bamidbar, they're irritating. They're irritated. They're rebellious. There's lots of problems. There's lots of complaining. There's lots of conflict. And based on another midrash, Darda is one of the names of it's some name that appears somewhere. The generation of the Midbar is called Dor De'ah, the generation of expanded consciousness. So you have on the one hand the people who whined and moaned about having to eat the manna. They didn't have enough water, and they didn't, they kind of thought Korach would be a better leader than Moses, and there's all kinds of bad stuff. And the Midianite girls look really attractive, and they ate the manna, and they were Dordeah, and they were traveled wrapped in Anane Kavod, clouds of the divine presence. And so, you just see basically these two parallel ways of thinking about the long journey through the desert.
is that just a feature of memory? And this maybe kindle your historical
It,
imagination because when you think about nostalgia and where what era you want to when everything was working, people think of nostalgically about the 50s, or they think nostalgia about the Victorian era. I mean, these were horrible periods too for some people. I don't know, Barry, if we want to weigh in on
yeah,
how
I
you
don't
can
know that
record.
it's necessarily nostalgia. I think what it is, it's a sense of perspective. That when we go through things day by day, we lack a context because we don't know how anything is going to turn out. When we take a view backwards, we can appreciate things that we did not notice before. So in the moment, which is what the Torah is, kind of the day by day, so to speak, journey of Bnei Israel through the wilderness, things often look bad. You get tired and you don't know where your relief is coming from. You're hungry and you wonder, how am I going to eat? You're thirsty. Where's the water? But by the time Jeremiah is looking back, he sees things that our ancestors who were actually in the wilderness might not have seen. And I want to try and tie this in with the beginning of our conversation. So I think one of the claims that Reuven, Gad, and Menashe make when they come to Moses is that sacred space is more than you think it is. It's not just a physical geography, there's a spiritual geography too. And we could become part of the sacred community without entering the land. And Moses, what does he do? He makes them come to fight. Now, ordinarily, when we think of blood being spilled in the Holy Land, it pollutes the land, but the blood that is spilled in the conquest actually sanctifies the land. And so the ones who will come back to the east side of the Jordan will have participated in the conquest of the land, and that's enough. They remain part of the people because they have paid that price.
I'm not sure I I'm not sure if I agree with the blood spilled sanctifying the land, but I would go so far as to say that sacrifice is the key here, and that the sense of shared sacrifice is what is being asked for. That in the challenge that is being issued to Moses is, what is the meaning of peoplehood here? And if this people is going to be a confederation of tribes, at least as the Torah conceives it here, then all the tribes have to bear their burden, basically.
Right, but I think, going back to Jeremy's earlier point about the modern state of Israel, people who are not willing to pay with their blood have a different stake in the community than those people that do pay with their blood. I mean, that's part of the modern dilemma in the state of Israel today.
Different, of course, that is inarguably true. A different stake, and we've all felt that, when Israelis may say to American Jews, even the most involved, you don't send your children into the army. You don't, we all know that Israeli parents have nightmares that we don't have. And Elliot, who has children living in Israel, may soon have those nightmares in ways that those of us who don't have kids there, I may one day have that myself. So, and it is not binary either or. That is a key thing I do want to insist. I want to insist that it is not true. And I think the story of, Bnei Gad u'Bnei Reuven v'chatzi shevet HaMenashe tell us that even in Bible times, it was not an either or thing, that either you lived in Shechem and Hebron, or you were like falling off the edge of the globe. The story of Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven has an interesting, shows up in an interesting way later in the book of Joshua. Moses says to them, here's the deal, you guys got to go fight, you got to be part of the advanced troops, and if you do that, then you can still be part of this people, and you can go home to your fertile, pastures over there in what we would call contemporary Jordan. And so they do that. They fulfill their military obligations, then they cross the Jordan again, and they go back, and they live there, and they do something totally bizarre, which is that they build an extravagant worship site. Anybody who looks at the book of Deuteronomy knows that, at least in Devarim, of which Joshua is literarily speaking, kind of the next chapter, there's supposed to be one altar, and maybe it starts off in Shiloh, but ultimately will land in Jerusalem. The Bible is very anxious and suspicious about multiple altars, and Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven appear to have built a shadow temple. What in the world are you thinking about? And so Joshua and Pinchas are portrayed as going to see them and asking them, what in the world are you thinking about? And they say to the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, say, no, don't you worry. We are not offering sacrifices. We never in a million years intended to offer sacrifices. But what we are doing here is replicating the national altar so that nobody can say, you guys are not part of the same people. Our children won't say it, and won't say it about distance from the heartland. And your people won't say to our children at the boundaries, you're really not part of this national experience. The presence of a shadow altar is what reminds those quote unquote, I mean, it's anachronistic to say they're diaspora Jews,
Yeah.
but they're not living at the center, they're not living in the heartland, and yet they build something in their communities which say we are still part of the same people with the same national mission. And I find that, as a Jew living in New York City, pretty stirring. I find that pretty stirring that the ancient Bnei Reuven say we have to have, the most important building in our community is one that reminds us that we're part of that other community over there.
Interesting. We're coming to the end of our conversation. We also need to put the signpost on the end of the book of Bamidbar. And I always like to point this out, that the end of a book is also a reflection of where we are in the year. And when we come back next week, we'll be talking about the book of Dvarim, and it always feels, and here I'm speaking to the camp audience as well as our congregational and community audience. it always feels when we get to the end of Bamidbar, I don't want to say the summer's over, but this is a midpoint. There's a kind of midpoint here in our own seasonal time, because we are orienting ourselves towards conclusion. I mean, coming into the book, end of this book, this is also the end of Moses's life. We're going to see that in strong relief already starting next week. And for all of us, it's 4/5 of the year. I mean, I started out by enumerating the number of days. It's 300 days since the war, 300 days of the hostages, and this year more than any other year in recent memory, we are so mindful of time, so mindful of the different seasons of the year, and the different modalities and moods of the year. And here we are.
Another way to look at it, Elliot, is that we've been reading the Torah from its beginning since the war began, because it
Exactly.
began on
Yeah.
Simchat Torah when we began to
Yeah.
read Sefer Breshit.
It's a profound observation that we've had a dual narrative. We've had a split screen in our liturgical and our spiritual and our congregational lives. I certainly feel this as someone who gets up every week and has to talk about teach the Torah, and I'm always since October the 7th, thinking about this in terms of the world and what kind of world we're in, and even thinking about the themes that we've spoken about, which is that consist of how this is remembered, and how will we remember this particular period of time. Who knows? Because we just don't know how this is going to play itself out. We're at a particular junction point, certainly with the events of this week, the assassinations that have taken place. It feels like one of many strings of turning points here. We hope and pray for the protection of Israel in these very tense days. But not to end on that note, we want to just kind of give a couple of shout outs. First, Barry, we're also going to say you have a yurt site coming up. This
Yeah,
is
I have two actually, but my father, Mel Chesler, his 10th year site is Monday, Rosh Chodesh Av, which
yeah.
I thought was important to mention because Aharon's yurt site is also mentioned as being on Rosh Chodesh Av in the Torah reading this week. And my brother Bruce 2 days later on the 3rd of Av.
And
In another
Jeremy,
year. In another year.
we got a big shout out also.
I had a lovely contact with a friend of mine, Judy Fried Siegel, who's a doctor and a mohelet, and I had contact with her about a Brit Milah in the community, and she mentioned that she listened to us from last week. So to Judith Fried Siegel, doctor and mohelet, dny@gmail.com, if anybody wants. And I want to give a big shout out also to the American athletes, some of whom no doubt are Jewish, and the Israeli athletes in Paris. I watched a swimming race today. The Israeli swimmer didn't make the finals of his event, but he put up a mighty fight. I was rooting for him all
We
the
have
way.
a Canadian gold also in swimming. I used to race swimming, you know that?
I remember that you did Canadian gold. Well, who
Canadian.
won the thing?
I,
Oh, Summer McIntosh.
McIntosh.
She's a superstar. She's 17 years old. She's just on fire.
That's right. Well, big shout out to everybody. Hope everybody's enjoying that. And in a way of shouting out to people, we want to just thank everyone for watching, for listening. Our special thank you to our production team at Machaneh Ramah in the Berkshires for putting us online and in the amphitheater and throughout the camp on radio, 102.3 FM. And to everyone who's listened to us and who writes into us, we thank you for your comments and for your patience and your attention and your enjoyment of our conversation. We look forward to seeing you next week on the next edition of Parsha Talk. Have a great Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom from all of
Shabbat
us.
Shalom.